Hi there BookTube, this is Emma from Emma's Bookish Lifestyle, and this is just a quick DNF video. Just basically to kind of explain to you how I decide to DNF books, and it's something that's been very new to me this year. I implemented it from January, and just to explain to you the 5 books I've DNF'd so far in this half of the year and why I've DNF'd them. So first of all, and the first book that I DNF'd this year was The Mermaid and Mrs. Hancock. I know, this is going to be a controversial one. Now, I am a fan of historical fiction. I really enjoy it. However, I didn't enjoy this particular book. I know it is madly, madly loved within the BookTube community, and I'm not slating that in any way, shape or form. However, Imogen Hermesgauer's writing I found was very slow, very dry. The plot was kind of meandering, and also I couldn't really invest in the characters. And so I think that basically that sort of meandering pace and the inability to relate to the characters was the reason why I DNF'd that book. So that was the first book I DNF'd this year in January. The next book I DNF'd was The Bedlam Stacks by Natasha Pulley. Again, another one that's been well talked about on BookTube and enjoyed. This one, for me, I just couldn't connect to it. I tried to switch to the audio version of it, and even the audio story I found really difficult. Again, characters. I seem to be drawn at the moment to very strong character relatable plots and stories, and sadly, again, I couldn't connect with it. The Bedlam Stacks wasn't for me. So in February, I DNF'd that one. I seem to be going through, you'll see as we read through this, that I seem to have DNF'd a book a month pretty much since January. So in March I read a book buddy read with Mel from Mel's Bookland Adventures, and we both picked up In Farley Fields by Rhys Bowen. And I have to say that we completely both agreed on this, and we DNF'd the story. First of all, Mel DNF'd it slightly before me. Not that that makes a blind bit of difference, but she saw the tropes and things coming, I think, a lot earlier than I did, because she'd read a further Rhys Bowen story. This was a new author for me, so I wanted to give it a little bit more extra time in case it was more up my alley. But sadly, it really wasn't. The story felt really contrived. The writing style was easy to read, and you know that it was very well written, in that I didn't have any problem with the writing style at all, but it did feel at times like the story was kind of protracted, and the way that it was written made it feel even more protracted, so to speak. And there were tropes in there, and despite the fact that it was based around an event that happened and it was in a rural village during World War II, it just sadly didn't sit with me, and I ended up DNFing that one. In April, I also DNF'd a book, and that was kindly provided to me on NetGalley. It was a translated piece of fiction by Jose Eustasio Rivera called The Vortex. Now, this was based in kind of like a Peruvian type setting, if I remember correctly. I might be slightly wrong. But the way that this read was very, very dry. It was basically I think it might have even been about Conquistador. Actually, thinking about it, it was. That memorable, I can barely remember, but it was about Conquistador, and about the story about him, and he ran away with the love of his life, purportedly, and how he treats her on their travels, and they go out into the rural countryside. And what I felt about this was the translation of it was as well as can be expected. I'm not an expert on translated fiction. I don't have a second language, so I don't know if it was well done or not. However, when I was reading the story, the writing just felt really, really dry. It didn't kind of have any flows, and it also didn't seem to have any stops. Because it wasn't broken into chapters, it was just almost like one ongoing story. At the point where I DNF'd it, it was because I just didn't feel compelled to come back to it. It was dry, it was not flowing. I really didn't like the main character. He was obnoxious, and there didn't seem to be a lot of hope for him. His partner in this story, the love interest in his story, was very weak and frustrating for me. She had no gumption, no backbone, no strength. She could clearly see him doing things to her and wasn't prepared to or wasn't able to do anything about it. And yeah, I just found it really, really difficult to get on with. And the fact that there was constant narrative with no distinct breaks made it really hard to breathe and read. It kind of, you know, there wasn't any distinct spots where you could sit there and think, do you know what, I'll put that down, walk away, I can pick it up again in a couple of hours, or at the end of the day, or tomorrow, and read another chapter. Because it wasn't written like that, it wasn't feasible to do it. And I think that equally came about to the problem of why it felt so dry to me and why it felt so protracted. And finally, the last book that I DNF'd was in May, and that was Chappie by Patricia Grace. This was Mel from Mel's Bookland Adventures World Book Club book, and sadly I haven't been able to join in as much as I would like, but this one really interested me, so I picked it up on my Kindle. And I have to say, unfortunately, it just wasn't for me. I didn't get on well with the writing style, and I think that part of the writing style that I found so hard going was possibly due to the kind of the turns of phrase. It was written in a particular way to portray a particular way of life, a particular nationality seems the wrong word, a particular community. And so there were certain turns of phrases and things that just weren't making it easy for me to read. But then on top of that, I was finding it very hard again to be connected to it in any way. I wasn't drawn back to it, it didn't hook me, and the story, although it sounded interesting in premise, didn't for me seem to fulfill the promise that I was hoping it was going to. So again, I DNF'd that book. I hope you're all well, BookTube. Just so you know, my DNFing policy is basically that I give books between 50 to 100 pages depending on how well or not I'm getting on with certain aspects of the book. And if I'm not enjoying it, I do put it down. If it's something that I don't feel compelled to pick back up again, I won't. There are far too many amazing books out there, and they're all being published day on day on day. Each week at the moment there seems to be great books coming out to be published, and each month. And as you can probably tell from Dave from Wild Reads channel, because he's been promoting some of the books that were of interest to him each month, and a lot of his books are things that I enjoy reading, there is just way too much to not, you know, to struggle through a book that you're just not connecting with. And that's not to say that these opinions are anybody else's opinions. These are solely mine. You may have read any of these books and thoroughly enjoyed them, and validly so. Each of us has our own book characteristics that we read to and we enjoy and we observe. And some of us don't like to DNF at all. Some of us haven't DNF'd before this year, such as myself. I used to struggle through to the bitter end whether I enjoyed it or not, and then I used to get to the end of it and think, oh, But the other thing I think is the other reason why DNF sometimes can be handy, and the reason why I implemented it into my reading life, is basically I had a couple of major book depressions, you know, book hangovers, but not from a positive standpoint, not because the book was absolutely astounding, but just because I had forced myself to read a book I was not enjoying, and it's just not worth it. It really isn't. A book hangover for an awesome 5-star read, we all have them. We all enjoy them and ponder what to read next to follow after that amazing book. I'll be brutally honest, so far this year I haven't had that 5-star wow read yet. I'm looking for it. I'm hoping it will come shortly, but I haven't as yet sort of experienced that. I've still got 6 months left, so who knows. But yes, in regard to DNFs, it's everybody's personal preference, and these views are purely my own. But if you'd like to discuss any of them, or you think I might have misunderstood or misinterpreted anything in these books, I'm happy to talk about that, and I'm happy to hear your thoughts. And if any of these are worth a retry for any particular reason, or you think maybe I just wasn't in the right headspace at the right time, there is something there that I might appreciate, then please feel free to let me know in the comments down below. I hope you're all well, and I'll speak to you soon. Take care for now, Butchie. Bye.